And again, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We from International Students of Islamic Psychology would like to welcome you in an introduction to Islamic psychology course, a 5-part series with Dr. Abdullah AlSabeeh. We are now in our second session, the cognitive framework in modern science in the Islamic alternative and its components. Before we start, we would like to quickly introduce you to ISIP, and we would like to start with very short prayer. So we get all the benefits and blessings from this session. Allahumma infa'na bima alamtana wa alimna ma yanfa'una wa zidna ilman. O Allah, benefit us by that which you have taught us, and teach us that which will benefit us and increase us in knowledge. Allah would like to ask you to extend your prayers for the father of Dr. Abdullah AlSabeeh, who is now in the hospital, and we would really be grateful and appreciate the attendance of Dr. Abdullah AlSabeeh in this hard time for him. May Allah increase his reward for what he's doing right now for us. Let us just quickly, before we start, introduce International Students of Islamic Psychology and our mission statement. We would like to create, and we are creating, an inclusive space designed to connect people with diverse backgrounds interested in Islamic psychology. We're also aiming to disseminate knowledge, share resources, and discuss best practices in a free and accessible manner. This is a platform to enable further development of people's personal and professional interests, studies, and understanding of Islamic psychology within their communities and countries of origin. Also, we would like to share our core values, which are indispensable part of our organization. We stick to constant respect, compassion, service, companionship, God consciousness, truthfulness, integrity, loyalty, and knowledge. Would also like to remind you the Zoom etiquette of this course. We are kindly asking you to keep on mute when not speaking. Also, would be great if you rename yourself with your first name and country, so we know how to address you. This meeting, as you already know, it's been recorded, so we are kindly asking you not to make your own recordings or take screenshots, and of course to stick to the guidelines for participations. We would not tolerate no racist, no inflammatory or derogatory comments. We would like to stick to Islamic values. If you have any kind of questions, please ask them in the chat. And of course, we will appreciate your suggestions, comments, and feedback from this session. And in order for you to get to know us much better and to connect with us, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Join one of our WhatsApp groups of Islamic psychology. You'll have the link in the chat. And in the future, you are more than welcome to become part of ISIP. Our website is under construction right now, but once it's done, you'll have access to digital library, to newsletter, and much more. So join us, and we will be really happy to have you with us. Dr. Abdullah AlSabeeh, who was kind enough to participate even in the difficult family situation that he's having right now. We are very grateful for that. Dr. Abdullah AlSabeeh is a former associate professor of psychology at the University of Imam Muhammad Ibn Saud in Riyadh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He is one of the renowned scholars in the Islamic psychology in the Arabic world. He is also an author of papers and a book. The Arabic, I think it's in Arabic. In the English translation is Introduction to Islamic Psychology, a Perspective on Islamic Rooting of Islamic Psychology. And if Dr. Abdullah is ready, he may start. Dr.
Yes,
Abdullah.
yes. I start now. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. هذا هو لقاؤنا الثاني في 5 محاضرات عن I'm sorry, I started in Arabic. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. This is our second meeting about Islamization of psychology or Islamic psychology. And inshallah, today we are going to speak about the framework or the cognitive framework in modern science and its relation to psychology. In the first lecture, we concluded that the goal of Islamization is to find the Islamic framework of knowledge. Also, we concluded that Islamic psychology cannot develop without an Islamic framework of knowledge. We said also the independence of the Islamic epistemology framework is necessary. And without independence, Islamization or Islamic psychology cannot arise. Today's lecture is about the cognitive framework in modern science, and I will address the following issues. First, the definition of the cognitive framework. Second, cognitive framework of functions. Third, how do science arise? Fourth, the emergence of the Western cognitive framework. Fifth, characteristics of the Western cognitive framework. The emergence and definition of the cognitive framework. This term, paradigm, the term paradigm appeared in the English language after Thomas Kuhn published his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions in 1962. And since then, this term has had great importance in epistemology and in the sociology of knowledge. The Islamic paradigm or cognitive framework or intellectual model is the philosophical or intellectual background from which the researcher begins in understanding the world around him, in studying issues of science and its phenomena, and judging and evaluating them. So that without the paradigm or the cognitive framework, the researcher cannot do research, cannot understand the world around him, cannot think systematically. So it is necessary and must. What are the functions of the paradigm or cognitive framework? The knowledge paradigm, the knowledge framework defines many things. I'll list 6 of them. The paradigm defines the source of knowledge, decide which source of knowledge appropriate for you, or from where to get your knowledge. Second, the method of getting knowledge. Since we talked about the source, we have to talk about the method. How can we get into the source and get the information? Third, research field, where you should make your or do your research. Fourth, when knowledge is true or false, or the criteria of the facts. Some knowledge you are going to get can be considered science, and some knowledge can be considered not science and not right knowledge. According to what? What are the criteria can define science or not science for you? Fifth, it helps in the interpretation of knowledge and in the interpretation of the world around you. The paradigm helps in the interpretation of knowledge and the interpretation of the world around you. Or six, regulate thinking. I will talk, inshallah, about the first four functions in the next lectures. I'll give you an example about the paradigm, the effect of paradigm or the cognitive framework. The evidence considered was the demonstrative or the analytical. The evidence considered was the analogy, the formal analogy, or the mental analogy, all of which have the same significance. And it is known as the holistic analogy or the Aristotelian analogy. This is a framework of knowledge that humanity inherited from Greek philosophy, and it was the one that dominates the sciences for nearly 2,000 years. This epistemology framework proved incapable and replaced by another epistemological framework during the Renaissance era. So the analytical evidence was no longer valid for inference in issues of science, and the empirical evidence replaced it. Now, if you come and say the evidence for my knowledge is the analytical evidence, scientists will not accept that. In the past was the only acceptable evidence, but now people will ask about the empirical evidence, not the analytical evidence. And this is the difference between two different paradigms or two different frameworks. Now let us take examples from the Quran about the paradigm and its effect on how we perceive the world around us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Furqan, وَلَقَدْ أَتَوْا عَلَى الْقَرْيَةِ الَّتِي أُمْطِرَتْ مَطَرَ السَّوْءِ أَفَلَمْ يَكُونُوا يَرَوْنَهَا بَلْ كَانُوا لَا يَرْجُونَ نُشُورًا. Allah said, and they had come to the town which had been raining misfortune, so would they not have seen it? That rather, they did not hope for resurrection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in this verse that a person may see the facts before his eyes, but he is unable to comprehend them and link the causes with their effects or consequences. Because the cognitive perception that proceeds from understanding the existence around it is a distorted perception. He will not make a connection between the causes and the result, because the paradigm is not capable to do this connection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in that verse, did they not see it, but did not hope for a resurrection? The reason they did not make connection between causes and result is that they do not believe in resurrection. So the integrity of the cognitive perception is necessary for the safety of knowledge, and it does not harm if the research method followed is deficient. It is often was, so we develop, and as it often was, so we develop and expand it to include more facts in existence. If there is a deficit, the paradigm is not complete, but it is not completely wrong. It's not, sometimes our paradigm is not perfect, but if it is totally wrong, it will misdirect us. But there is some missing part of it. We may, through our trial and our research, complete the paradigm and correct the paradigm. The greatest danger lies in the deficiency of the cognitive perception and the methodological framework from which we proceed in the interpretation of the events of existence. Here's another example. قال تعالى ولقد أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه فقال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره أفلا تتقون فقال الملأ الذين كفروا من قومه ما هذا إلا بشر مثلكم يريد أن يتفضل عليكم ولو شاء الله لأنزل ملائكة ما سمعنا بهذا في آبائنا الأولين إن هو إلا رجل به جنة فتربصوا به حتى حين. And indeed we sent Noah to his people, and he said, "O my people, worship Allah. You have no other ilah but Him. You have no other God but Him. Will you not then be mindful of Him, exhibit self-restraint?" But the chiefs of the people who disbelieved said, "He is no more than a human being like you. You seeks to make himself." He said he seeks to make himself a superior to you. Had Allah will, He surely could have sent down angels. Never did we hear such a thing among our fathers of old. He is only a man in whom is madness, so wait for him a while. وقال في آية أخرى في نفس السورة وقال Allah subhanahu said in the same surah وقال الملأ من قومه الذين كفروا وكذبوا بلقاء الآخرة وأترفناهم الحياة الدنيا ما هذا إلا بشر مثلكم يأكل مما تأكلون منه ويشرب مما تشربون ولئن أطعتم بشرا مثلكم إنكم إذا لخاسرون. And the chiefs of his people who disbelieved and denied the meeting in the hereafter, and whom we gave the luxuries and comfort of this life, said, "He is no more than a human being like you. He eats of that which you eat and drinks of what you drink. If you were to obey a human being like yourselves, then verily you indeed would be losers." In these verses from Surah Al-Mu'minun, the messenger calls his people and present them with the evidence of his sincerity, but they do not consider the invitation and its benefit to them and whether it is right or wrong. And they do also not look at the evidence of the messenger's sincerity. Why? The reason they said is because the messenger is a human being like them, and they believe that God does not, or Allah does not send a human messenger, but rather sends angels. Therefore, the deviant intellectual perception from which they proceed in understanding what is around them is a reason for their reluctance to consider the call of the messenger and his evidence. So they did not look at the evidence the messenger presented to them, either about his claim of being a prophet or his da'wah or his call to them to monotheism or to tawheed. They did not look at the evidence he presented to them. Why? Because they believe that he's a liar, because they believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not send a human being as a messenger. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send only angels. So they rejected the call because of the paradigm, the pre-perception they had about this matter. How do science arise? Do science arise through accumulation or through the emergence of cognitive framework? One famous theory that explains the emergence of science is Kahn's theory. In Kahn's theory, Kahn said there are two frameworks or two paradigms: the formal paradigm, which dominated science, followed by scientists, and the alternative. And people will not leave the formal paradigm until they find some shortness in the formal paradigm. Then they will move to the other paradigm, so that science will develop through this movement or through this revolution against the formal paradigm and following the new paradigm. The emergence of the cognitive framework, the influential cognitive framework in contemporary psychology was not formed with the emergence of psychology in 1879, but rather arose with the emergence of modern European thought in the era of Renaissance and Enlightenment, and developed with it to what it has reached now. The emergence of the cognitive framework. Europe in the Middle Ages was living in a struggle with the three obstacles hindering its growth. First one is the church and the Bible. Second, the Aristotle's philosophy and Aristotelian analogy. And third, the feudalism. European thinkers sought to find a framework of knowledge that could overcome these three obstacles. It is clear that the epistemological framework that was formed over decades is a response to cognitive, religious, and social challenges, and not the result of scientific research. About the 17th century, Albert Levy says, the Renaissance declared a rebellion against the rule of religion, and hence the revolution against the church, against the authority, against the scholastic thought, Christianity, and against Aristotle, and in a sudden interest in the problems revolving around man, nature, and the human society flourished. Also, Jerome Revitz says in the Encyclopedia Britannica about the history of science, the picture of science now common is only one among numbers of possible conceptions of science. And this picture that we know is only the product of temporary or accidental circumstances. And this picture is only one of the stages of continuous process of development. It is not a result of scientific research, but it is a result of social circumstances. Now, what are the characteristics of this framework, which developed through these circumstances? As a result of the conflict between the church and science, the epistemological framework was characterized by 5 features. First one, materialism. The research has come limited to what observation can encompass, whether it is in laboratory or in the observed nature. Second, so that a researcher will research only through which the nature can have, which he can observe, not something beyond his observation or beyond his lab. Or the second character, atheism. Atheism was not an end to science or goal of knowledge in the beginning, but it came as a result of 2 things. The first, a systematic error in research and the fraud of ideological materialism. Second, the historical conflict between science and the church. The phenomena, a scientist will explain it just within its borders, not beyond. If he explain it with a factor outside of the phenomena, scientists will not accept that. They will say you are speaking about either religion or philosophy. If you said, for example, a storm caused by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the scientists will say, now you are speaking about religion, not science. Earthquake, if you explain it and say this is because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want to do that, they will not accept it. They will say you are speaking science, religious, in terms of religion or philosophy. So that the creator is outside of the phenomena. It is it was taken away from science. You cannot speak about the creator, only speak about the phenomena itself. This is where the atheism starts. When a student study these courses through years, then he will not consider the role of Allah or of God or religion. Just he will speak about the phenomena itself and will think within the phenomena, not outside of the phenomena. The fourth, relativity or subjectivity in values. Many Western researchers on social studies see that values are made by people and have no religious basis, and that is why they see that values can differ from one society to another and then change in one society over time, so that what is forbidden becomes authorized and what is authorized becomes forbidden. This deprives values of their sanctity and makes instrumentalism or pragmatism the norm of behavior in modern society. Values by itself, either good or bad, ugly or beautiful. To say thanks to someone did something good for you. It is something people will not differ about this. But in social science now, all values made by people has no religious basis. Fourth, secularism is in social life. Due to the conflict between science and the church and what appeared to people from the mistakes adopted by the church and the contradictions inside the Bible and among its religions, secularism came as a savior from the injustice and deviation of the church. The idea of secularism is based on restricting religion to the church and removing its dominance from social and political life. In secularism, religion is an individual decision and has nothing to do with society. The fifth characteristics and last, individualism. Individualism is a philosophy that originated in Europe in the Renaissance and reached its zenith with the French Revolution. It is based on sanctifying the freedom of the individual and not detracting from it or limiting it, whether by the state, civil society, institutions, or religions or religious institutions. The individual is the one who determines for himself his intellectual, doctrinal, and behavioral choices, including his own values and interests. The task of the law is limited to regulating the freedom of the individual, not diminishing it and preventing him from infringing on the liberties of others. These 5 features have become directed to the scientific research method, and it has been settled in the minds of many researchers that it is a given and part of the scientific method, and not pure issues that arose due to historical circumstances and their and the product, and they thought that it is the product of scientific research, while the reality is that it is the result of a historical conflict. Now, these are the this is the framework dominated science, and inshallah we will speak about an alternative paradigm in the next lecture and the rest of the 5 lectures. ومعذرة جزاكم الله خير، اختصرت كثيرا، وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا.